took home the biggest purse in women's tennis history at 4.8 million, biggest prize money. And they asked her, I loved it. They asked her in the press conference, what are you going to do with this payday? They're like, you just brought home the biggest one. She was like, wait, really? She didn't even know like how big the first place prize was. And you could tell it was honest. And they're like, so, are you going to treat yourself? And she's like, well, I had just got a house recently. And then, I'm going to a music festival in a couple weeks. And like, that was kind of like, almost like she's alluding to like, maybe I'll get like the VIP package. Of course, she's already like in that box, but she's, it was just funny. She's like, I'm not somebody that really spends a lot of money. So like, it's awesome to win. Or like, I'm going to keep taking care of my family, yada, yada. But one of the many reasons I love Coco Gauff.
Saudi Arabia recently spent $15.5 million during the WTA finals, and Coco Gauff is ready to perhaps take home more than $5 million for the victory. That is additional cash than the majority of Grand Slam winners receive. Though the reward money is unprecedented, though the site is debatable, and Coco only acknowledged how fortunate women's tennis players will have this chance. To put it one way, I'm lucky. Yes. Prior to dissecting this, leave a comment below. The prize is $15.5 million. Money in Saudi Arabia that is worth playing, or should gamers be more worried about where is the money coming from? Now let's begin with the figures since they're truly astounding. The WTA finals take place in Saudi Arabia's Riyadh is offering $15.5 total prize money of $1 million. Though the winner will get more than $5 million. The winning pair's team receives $950,000. Even athletes who fail to go past the walk away from the round-robin stage with substantial checks. This is not doubt the biggest prize fund in tennis history for women. It dwarfs what at big slams. It produces the majority of other WTA events appear to be pocket shift through comparison. And that's all taking place in Saudi Arabia, which is where the narrative becomes convoluted. And why is Coco using the word lucky? A little hefty lifting.
Biggest paycheck in WTA history, and she didn't even know. She said she knew there was some money involved, but she didn't know just how much was involved. So she was very pleased when she found that out. But it did make me think of when Yannick Sinner was asked, did he go to Saudi Arabia for the six Slam Kings for the paycheck? And he said, doesn't play tennis for money. And I think clearly Coco didn't either, because she had no idea of what was coming her way. So that was actually quite a nice moment rather than a, motivated by money win.
Coco Gauff, having recently won the Wuhan Open, conducted an interview in which she was inquired about the enormous prize money in Riyadh waiting. Her answer was, to put it plainly, it's interesting. She stated that tennis is the norm when it comes to women's sports prize money, and that athletes are fortunate to have this chance.
Despite all the controversies and criticisms surrounding women's tennis season-ending finale WTA finals, the tournament still got underway in Saudi Arabia's Riyadh. And while many star players like Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova have been vocal in their dissent towards the Saudi ambition in women's tennis, particularly the current world number 3 Coco Gauff came out in strong support of this move. She basically says the WTA finals may be a blessing for women's sports in the oil-rich nation. But what does the ground reality in Saudi really say? Is there a discord there? Coco Gauff's statement, I'm sure, makes many believe that Saudi will take women's tennis to the next levels. But will that really translate to a massive change for the women athletes in Saudi?
She gave credit to pioneers such as Billie Jean King and Venus Williams for her battle for equality paid decades ago, which is unquestionably accurate and equitable. However, she then turned to discussing how tennis has a duty to serve as a lighthouse for other sports for women in terms of compensation. Honorable sentiment. Totally true point. However, she's stating all of this in the framework of defending a competition that is supported by a nation with one of the worst records for women's rights worldwide. You could cut through the irony with a knife. American Coco Gauff, tennis player who has spoken out against in the past social justice concerns, where let's speak about how fortunate ladies are in tennis. Players will get cash from a government that mandates women by law to make big life decisions with male guardians' choices for them. Saudi women were unable to even operate a vehicle until 2018. They are nonetheless subject to stringent limitations on mobility, marriage, and fundamental liberties. However, let's discuss how this $15 5 million is a step forward for sports for women. The dissonance in cognition is just amazing. Right now, prior to people claim that this is unjust to be clear, Coco in particular is not the only player who has to cope with this paradox. The WTA as a whole chose to accept Saudi funds, and the majority of the top players are taking part with little public reluctance. Coco just so happens to be the one conducting the interview using terms like fortunate and accountable in connection with a competition that's basically sports washing at its best. Saudi Arabia is investing billions for entertainment, sports, and cultural gatherings in particular to enhance its global reputation and divert from violations of human rights. That isn't conspiracy theory. According to Saudi Vision 2030 policy, they're not concealing it. The $5 million award for the champion is genuinely transformative. Money, especially for an individual such as Coco who has a lot of support already. Agreements. The last time she won the WTA finals, she earned almost $4.8 million a year. This was the biggest prize awarded in tennis history for women at the time. The funds originated from the prior version of the competition, which took place in Cancun. Currently, Saudi Arabia has raised that figure even more, making certain that the WTA finals are by far the most profitable event in women's tennis. The question that no one in tennis asks is ready to publicly inquire as to why are they acting in this way? Is it just because of a sincere passion for women's tennis and a wish to advance equality? Or is it since investing $15.5 million on a tennis competitions are reasonably priced? Method of purchasing global credibility and favorable press coverage? Coco said according to her interview, tennis is so worldwide including participants from various ethnicities, and she intends to participate in other sports. Tennis serves as an inspiration for leagues. Seek just compensation. That's fantastic feeling in a Hoover. The WNBA is going through a terrible CBA right now discussions in which players are at odds seeking improved pay and working conditions, as well as income sharing. Those athletes unquestionably deserve a higher salary. However, this is the unpleasant reality. The WNBA players are attempting to obtain that cash from the earnings of their own league and ownership structure rather than through collaboration with autocratic governments seeking to sports wash their reputations. There's a quite notable distinction between us deserve a just portion of the money we produce, and we'll collect funds from any place, irrespective of the source as long as the check clears. The analogy to other sports for women that Coco created is intriguing since it shows how different sports are managing this problem. Additionally, the LPGA has taken Saudi funds for competitions. The Formula Saudi Arabia hosts racing events. There have been significant boxing matches. However, for instance, women's football has been more circumspect. Each player has voiced reservations regarding the morality of playing in nations with low human records of rights. That has nothing to do with football. Possesses clean hands. Many World Cups, several significant competitions have taken place in troublesome nations, but there's at least been increased public discussion and advocacy back. In tennis, the dialogue appears to be, look at this incredible prize, wow. Money. With minimal conversation about its origin and motivation. Coco's observation of Billie Jean King and Venus Williams's battle for equal compensation is totally legitimate and deserving of recognition. Those women engaged in combat. Strong in the face of substantial opposition. Why there is salary parity in women's tennis at Grand Slams as a result of their campaigning, and the support of numerous others. However, this is when things get messy. Billie Jean King battled for equitable compensation from the competitions and groups that were already holding tennis competitions. Wasn't in favor of stealing money from repressive regimes in return for giving them public relations protection. There's a essential distinction between paying us the same as males for the same task, and anyone can give us money, ready to compensate us in spite of their human rights record. We're fortunate. The framing that Coco employed is especially intriguing since it implies a lack of agency or leverage. Similar to women's tennis, players are simply lucky that Saudi Arabia chose to bombard them with cash from the goodness of their hearts. However, that isn't the case. Saudi Arabia. This is not an act of charity on the part of Arabia. They are investing in their global perception. They are purchasing legitimacy, reaching audiences in the West, and favorable media attention. The WTA, as well as its participants, voluntarily take part in that transaction. Declaring it fortunate makes it sounds passive, as if simply occurred to tennis players instead, rather than a deliberate business choice that everyone who took part created with complete understanding of the moral ramifications. Now let's discuss the reward money itself. Structure, since it demonstrates how this event is important from a financial standpoint. Even athletes who lose a game get participation fees that are significant. The competition runs on. Everyone participates in a round-robin style. You get compensated after at least 3 games at every level you reach. Thus, even the player who is rated 7th and goes 0 and 3 in the roundabout leave with a few $100,000. That's additional, more than the majority of players do to win recurring events on the WTA circuit. The money, the motivation to take part is unquestionably enormous, and that's exactly the purpose. Saudi Arabia is making financial offers that's nearly impossible to decline, guaranteeing that every elite player appears and add legitimacy to the competition. Coco stated explicitly that if she travels unbeaten in Riyadh this year, she could make more than $5.2 million. That's one competition. Contrast that with Grand Slam prize money. It pays to win the US Open, roughly $3 million. Wimbledon is comparable. The French Open and the Australian Open are a little bit less. Thus, the WTA finals in more is paid by Saudi Arabia than by any Grand Slam. That is a purposeful tactic to make this competition seem like the highest level of women's tennis, the most significant occasion of the year. Additionally, from a purely economical standpoint, it is. Players' full year-end rankings and financial results are considerably affected by how they performed in Riyadh. Saudi Arabia benefits greatly from this power in the sport. The remark Coco talked about displaying the level to become the player I desire to be. Wu Han is a typical athlete after winning. Talk. She exudes confidence. She's having fun. All right. As she approaches the finals, she has momentum. All right. However, the background of these remarks being made regarding a competition supported by Saudi Arabia adds layers that most likely weren't meant. She desires to become the world's greatest player. Fantastic. Does being the world's greatest player mean need to steal money from oppressive governments? Yes, it seems as the WTA has determined that's where the funds is. Players don't actually have the choice to withdraw without having to. Substantial financial and professional ramifications. This raises a more general inquiry concerning sports and morality that nobody appears eager to take it seriously. Address. When does the money been too troublesome to handle? Should Saudi Arabia made a $50 million offer to the winner, would that alter the computation? $100 million. Is there a certain quantity of human rights issues that would make the tennis community claims that we shouldn't act in this way? Considering the present evidence, it seems that the answer is no. As long as the checks are clear and the facilities are pleasant, the moral issues are regarded as unimportant annoyances instead than dealing with breakers. Coco's statement that tennis is a worldwide sport with participants from numerous nationalities are real, yet they also draws attention to yet another complex feature of this circumstance. Players from various nations with their own human rights problems. Most likely, they won't condemn Saudi Arabia in public. Players from various nations that have economic or diplomatic connections with Saudi Arabia could experience pressure to take part and not create waves. American athletes such as Coco are positioned slightly differently due to the U.S.'s complex connection with Saudi Arabia that includes both human rights criticism and enormous armament sales as well as economic collaborations. Speaking out against Saudi Arabia while taking their cash for tennis competitions are uncomfortable, so most players simply don't do it. The analogy to the CBA talks between the WNBA and Coco made is especially intriguing since it displays several ideologies on how to improve women's pay. Athletes, the players in the WNBA, are attempting to reorganize the finances of their league to increase your income share, enhance working environment, and create long-term sustainability. That is difficult and unglamorous work that requires challenging discussions and possible strikes or lockouts. It is battling for systemic modification inside the current framework. The WTA is arguably accomplishing a lot of easier. Find the person who is willing to pay the most money and take it no matter where it originates. Both strategies could lead to increased compensation for athletes, however. They are neither morally comparable or structurally. The reality that Coco, specifically the term lucky, is worth investigating as luck suggests chance or luck as opposed to decision-making. Tennis players are not fortunate that Saudi this money is being offered by Arabia. They're deciding to accept it. The WTA leadership decided to collaborate with Saudi Arabia. The athletes decided to take part. Referring to it as luck eliminates agency and accountability from the formula. It's a linguistic action, most likely inadvertent, which makes the entire thing sounds less deliberate. Choice to take money for sports washing, and more akin to a lucky accident that occurred for everyone's advantage. Engaged. Examining Coco's own past. Advocating for social justice makes this scenario considerably more challenging. She's voiced opinions on racial justice. She's utilized her position to promote different reasons. She has been considerate and discussed social concerns in the past. Thus, it's not as though she's someone who never considers these things or is indifferent to injustice. This makes Saudi Arabia's acceptance, money and how it is presented as being fortunate even more startling. It's able to maintain two ideas concurrently. Tennis players that are female should be compensated more, and accepting funds from Saudi Arabia to carry out it raises ethical concerns. Both are able to be accurate. The fact that it broke records. There is no denying this reward money, and it will undoubtedly drive other competitions and groups to boost their own prize pools. That is most likely beneficial for tennis players' long-term financial run. However, it also establishes a precedent that nations with limitless oil wealth and poor human rights records can basically purchase entry into any sport. By providing prize money, they hope to. No one else can compete. That isn't a precedent specific to tennis. It's already evident in golf with LIV playing football in different leagues and boxing and mixed martial arts competitions. Sports are becoming more and more vehicles for authoritarian regimes to enhance their pictures, and participants are becoming more willing. So the monetary rewards are also big enough to be ignored. The lighthouse for others. Coco's use of women's sports terminology is appealing and aspirational. However, what does the beacon specifically display? That pay equity might be attained if you're ready to collaborate with repressive regimes. Human rights issues are, aside from monetary issues, that athletes are willing to go anywhere and do Anything as long as the cost is reasonable. Those may be unsettling facts regarding professional athletics, yet they're not. Precisely motivating words for others. Sports for women to watch. Perhaps the lesson here is that obtaining equitable compensation within moral frameworks, it's actually challenging, but attaining it by accepting money from anyone who is prepared to pay is a lot of simpler. Thus, Coco Gauff is on its way to Saudi Arabia will contend for $15.50 million, and referring to tennis players as fortunate to be given this chance, which is undoubtedly one way to frame accepting money washing in sports. If this malfunction provided you something to consider, hit that like and subscribe buttons. Let go of it. Make a comment. Is the prize money unprecedented? Worth sacrificing morality?